Lesson 8.3, factoring using greatest common factor. Okay, GCF stands for greatest common factor. Huge idea today, you guys, and that is the idea of factoring. This is the first time you've ever seen this, and factoring you can think of as reverse distribution. Just kind of understanding that factoring is doing distribution in reverse helps so much with understanding factoring. Okay, so today's all about looking at the greatest common factor. So let's see what we remember about the greatest common factor. If we look at 5a plus 35, and we break down each of these terms into factors, well, we can say that 5a is the same as 5 times a, right? 5 is a factor, and a is a factor. 35, we can break down and we can say 5 times 7, right? So 5 is a factor of 35 and 7 is a factor of 35. So the greatest common factor, the biggest factor they have in common is 5, right? They both are being multiplied by 5. They have it in common. And since they only have one in common, it's the greatest one they have in common. Then this says, what is the leftover from each term? Well, we had an a, and we had a positive 7, right? I'm talking about these numbers right here, the leftovers. So the factored polynomial, if we take out the 5, and then we write a parentheses, if we take out the 5 and we put the leftovers, a plus 7, this is what we are left with. So this is kind of what we're going to be doing today, getting here with our different expressions. This is our factored polynomial. Okay, so I need y'all to understand this right here and this right here are equivalent, right? But one is in factored form. Now we can always check our answer with the distributive property. So this is my answer. I'm going to distribute and watch what happens. 5 times a I know is 5a, and 5 times 7 I know is positive 35. So it's a big, easy, nice, great way to check. If I distribute, I get what I started with, right? That's huge. That is supposed to happen. So we're going back and forth from factored form to the expanded form, right, when it has been distributed. That's kind of where we're at today. So let's look at a few different examples. Okay, so we've got 3x minus 9. And first we always want to identify, okay, what is the GCF? What do they have in common? Well, they don't both have x. Okay, what about the number 3? Right, 3 can be multiplied 1 times 3, and 9 can be multiplied by 3 times 3, right? They both have 3 in common. Both of these terms are divisible by 3. So what we do to find the leftovers, you can kind of think about this as dividing, right? If I divide out the 3, see now it's on the outside, and I can find what's left over by using this division. So I take out the 3 divided by 3 and I get x. And 9 divided by 3 is a negative 3. This is my factored form. And again, just to check, it's always a good idea to check. It's easy to check too. Check my answer over here. So if I do 3x times 3, I get 3x and negative 9. This right here is what I started with. So I know that I did it correctly. Okay, let's try another one. Question 2. Looking for my greatest common factor, my GCF. All right, well, I can see that they both have x, and this one has x squared. What if I write it like this? What if I write this as 24x, and I write this as 16xx? Okay, they have x in common. What's the greatest number they have in common? Well, this has 1 and this has 1. So the greatest number they have in common is just 1x, x to the first power. So don't put x squared here, y'all. That would be wrong. Okay, so just x. Now what about the numbers? I've got 24 and 16. What numbers can 24 and 16 both be divided by? Well, 24 and 16 both be divided by 2. But wait a second. They can also both be divided by 4. Okay, but they can, they can also both be divided by 8. This is the one we want. This is the largest number that both 24 and 16 can be divided by. That's my greatest common factor. Okay, so that term is going to go outside of parentheses because we're going to take it out. We're going to assume that that's what was on the outside if we were to distribute. So to get what's left over, we divide by this. The x's cancel here, so 24 divided by 8 is 3. And here only one of my x's cancel, right? Imagine this is really x times x. So I'm still left with an x, and then 16 divided by 8 is 2. So this is my factored form once I take out the GCF, the greatest common factor. And again, y'all take the 2 seconds to check your answer. All right, redistribute. Looks like I would get 24x. 8 times 2 is 16. Then x times x is x squared. Is this what I started with? Yes, it is. All right, take that time to check. You will not regret it. If you get in that good habit now, it will really help you later. Okay, next term. Something that we haven't talked about yet is negatives. Y'all, if you have a negative in front, you should always factor it out. If you have a negative right here in this spot, always factor it out. And now we can kind of forget about the negative. So I have x squared and x. That was the same situation as last time. So they both have x, but they don't both have x squared, right? This one doesn't have x squared, so we cannot leave x squared as the greatest common factor. And now 4 and 6 can both be divided by 2. Can they both be divided by 3? No. So 2 is the biggest number that both of those 4 and 6 can be divided by. So negative 2x is what we're factoring out, right? We're taking it out. We're trying to figure out what we had started with if we had been doing distribution. So let's divide it out to find our leftovers. Negative 4 divided by negative 2 is positive 2. And x squared divided by x, we just are left with x to the first power, or just x. These x's cancel and we get positive, right? Negative 6 divided by negative 2 is a positive 3. So here's my expression. And then, yes, you guessed it, we are still going to check. Got a negative 2x and 2x plus 3. If I distribute, I've got negative 4x squared. Negative 2x times 3 is minus 6x, and that is what I started with, so I'm good. All right, problem 4. This one has 3 terms, not 1, but 3 terms. I'm going to do myself a little favor, and I'm going to write this out with all my variables. So I'm going to say 25xxy, 5xy plus y times y. Okay, so if I am looking for my GCF, let's see here, the greatest common factor. Let's look at the variables first. This has 2 x's, and this has an x, and this has no x's. So guess what? X is not part of my GCF because it was not in every single term. It was not in all 3 terms. This term has a y, and this term has a y, and this term has a y. This term actually has 2 y's, but I have a y in every single term, so GCF has a y in it. Now the number, my coefficient, I had a 25 and a 5 and a, okay, I guess this is a 1. Y'all, if you have 1, the only thing 1 can be divided by is 1 times 1. If any of your terms have a 1 in the front, there's nothing you can do. Like, that's your greatest common factor because that's the only factor it has. So even though 25 and 5 have 5 as the greatest common factor, you still can't use it because this 1 messes it up. So your GCF for this is 1y. So let's bring it on the outside here. Let's divide everything by 1y. And let's see what's left over. Okay, these cancel, so I still have 25x squared. These cancel, so I have plus 5x. And then on the end here, one of the y's gets canceled, so I'm still left with just y. This right here is my finished factored form. All right, and I'm going to take a second to check this really quick. So I had y times 25x squared plus 5x plus y. So this looks like it would be 25x squared y plus 5xy, and then plus y squared. Okay, perfect. That is what I started with, and now I've checked it, so I am good to go. Okay, Sorry about the interruption. So 2 more to go. Here we go. Last but not least, we've got 18x minus 9y. So let's go ahead and identify the GCF. This has y, this has x. So they don't have any variables in common, which means I don't have to deal with variables. We've got 9 and 18. Well, both 9 and 18 can be divided by 9 itself, so that's my GCF. So 9 goes outside, and we're going to figure out the leftovers here. 18 divided by 9 is 2, and x is still there. And then 9 divided by 9 is just 1, which we don't really have to write the 1, so we can just put y. This is my final answer. Let's go ahead and check. Let's see here. We've got 9 parentheses 2x minus y. So I've got 18x minus 9y. Perfect. That's what I started with. Okay. Last one, and yes, it kind of is a lot here. And again, I'm going to do myself the little favor of writing out all these variables. So we have 4a, then we have 3b's and a c. We have 16b and then 3 c's. Then we had an 8 and an a and 2 c's. So what is my GCF? Okay, let's look at the variables first. I have an a here, no a's here. So guess what? A is not in my GCF. Let's see, I have 3 b's here and a b here, but no b's here. So b is not part of my GCF. Okay, here I have 1 c and 3 c's and 2 c's. Okay, so I have c's in each of these terms. What's the greatest that I have in common? Well, they all have at least 1. All right, so we're limited because this only had 1. That's the most that each of them has, so we have just c. Now we're looking at the coefficients. I've got a 4 and a 16 and an 8. All 3 of those numbers can be divided by 2. Okay, but they can also all be divided by 4. And that's the biggest one because after that, we don't have any more factors for 4. So 4c is going to go outside, and we're going to figure out the leftovers by just dividing them all by 4c. Okay, 4 divided by 4 is 1. A and b cubed are just still there, and then c divided by, okay, the c's cancel. And the next one, 16 divided by 4 is 4, right? B stays the same, and then c 3 over c1, and we are left with c2. Right, this c cancels one of the c's on the top. And then finally, negative 8 divided by 4, that's going to be a negative 2. A is still there, and c squared over c is just left c to the first power, or just c. So this is my simplified factored form. All right, and yes, of course, we have to check and make sure we get it back what we originally started with. So I'm just going to do that right here. It's the last thing. So let's write this out. We had 4c ab cubed plus 4bc squared minus 2ac. And we distribute and we get 4ab cubed c plus 16, no a's, we got a b, and then c2 and c1, okay, so c3. And then finally negative 8, a, no b's, c2. Is that what I started with? Looking here. Yep, that is what I started with, so we are good. All right, just to summarize this process for you guys today, find the greatest common factor, divide it out, put that number, that greatest common factor on the outside, the parentheses, and you're good. Don't forget to check your answers because you can always tell if you did it wrong or right.